In about an hour, the Democrat Party will confront a momentous choice. Will Democrats launch a historic filibuster against helping oppressed victims of modern slavery because left-wing lobbyists appear to demand it? Will they do that at the behest of these left-wing lobbyists? Democrats filibustering help for terrified children and abused women would represent a new low here in the Senate. Filibustering help for terrified children and abused women, Mr. President, certainly represents a new low for the Senate. And the American people would not soon forget it, nor should they. It's hard to even keep straight anymore why Democrats would filibuster this human rights bill. The bill Democrats apparently now oppose was introduced months ago by a Democrat and a Republican. A Democrat and a Republican. The bill Democrats now oppose was originally co-sponsored by 13 of our Democratic friends. 13 of them co-sponsored it. The bill Democrats now oppose was approved by every Democrat on the Judiciary Committee. Every single Democrat on the Judiciary Committee supported the bill. And the bill Democrats now oppose was brought to the floor last Monday after Democrats agreed unanimously to do that. But that was Monday. That was Monday. By Tuesday, Democrats were threatening to launch a historic filibuster against helping the abused and the enslaved. Launching a filibuster against helping the abused and enslaved. Democrats' supposed rationale was that they hadn't bothered to read the very bill they'd introduced, co-sponsored, and voted for. That in itself is a stunning admission. But as embarrassing as this admission might be for Democrats, it doesn't tell the full story. It's obviously absurd to believe that not a single one of the 13 Democrats who originally co-sponsored this bill, and not a single member of any of these Democrats' well-educated staffs would have read this bill before agreeing to support it. Really hard to believe, isn't it? The bipartisan Hyde language Democrats now cite as the basis for their human rights filibuster wouldn't have been hard to find. It was sitting right there on page 4. Sitting right there on page 4. Democrats would have recognized the bipartisan Hyde provision easily, Mr. President, because so many Democrats voted to support the same bipartisan provision just 3 months ago in December. Mr. President, it was in the Cromnibus that most of our Democratic friends voted for in December, the very same language. So they surely would have recognized it sitting right there on page 4. The top Democrat on the Judiciary Committee certainly would have noticed the Hyde provision he supported in December. He actually offered an unrelated amendment to the very same page as the provision he now objects to. Now, the bipartisan Hyde language is supported by about 7 in 10 Americans. How do the American people feel about the Hyde language? 7 out of 10 Americans, as a policy principle, has been a part and parcel of the legislating process for decades. For decades. It appears in just about every funding bill we consider, and it appears in numerous authorizing bills that have received bipartisan support. Not surprisingly, the leadership of the House of Representatives said last night that any House-Senate agreement on a trafficking bill that includes a victims' fund will have to contain the Hyde Amendment, as we have done for nearly 40 years. So the House of Representatives says that any bill that passes the House will also include this language. What about that great bastion of conservatism, the Washington Post? Recently noted in an editorial, quote, "The Hyde Act has been enforced for 4 decades, end quote," said the Washington Post, and pointedly asked whether the inclusion of this bipartisan provision, quote, "justifies the defeat of this important legislation, end quote, the Washington Post. Given the long legislative history of this bipartisan provision and the overwhelmingly popular support for what it does, the answer obviously is no. No. Most of our colleagues on the other side voted for this very same provision 3 months ago. So let's remember what this debate should really be about. It shouldn't be about what left-wing lobbyists want. It should be about helping the victims of modern slavery. Victims like Melissa, who my colleague Senator Cornyn has spoken about before. She was sold into sex trade when she was just 12 years old. Beaten regularly. Chained to a bed in a warehouse. Even set on fire by those who enslaved her. That's Melissa's story. She said she just wanted to die, Mr. President. She just wanted to die. And when Melissa finally escaped the grasp of her tormentors, she wasn't treated like a victim. Melissa was treated like a criminal by our justice system. It's stories like Melissa's that should be motivating every member of this chamber to act. The victims who suffer in dark warehouses may not have the same clout as the lobbyists who appear to oppose this bill, but, Mr. President, these victims need our help, and they need it now. So if there truly are senators that are concerned with removing a bipartisan provision they have supported so many times in the past, they should offer an amendment to strike it. And then stop blocking this human rights bill. I've offered them a chance to do just that last week. Let's have a vote, a simple majority vote, on the measure they now belatedly find they object to, having supported it in the past. And then, as an official with a coalition against trafficking in women put it, win or lose, move on. But as it stands now, in her words, Senate Democrats are choosing a phantom problem over real victims. That's a spokesman for the Coalition Against Trafficking in Women. The White House needs to get involved here, too. So far, the White House has barely lifted a finger to help us pass this legislation. That needs to change. I think the White House should do this because it's the right thing to do. But if that's not enough, they should also consider the consequences of Democrats making a historic mistake. If Democrats actually vote to filibuster help for oppressed victims of modern slavery, Mr. President, I can't imagine the American people will forget it.